Alexander didn't show up to our divorce hearing because Lauren Vance had an OB/GYN ultrasound at 10 a.m. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, announced this in the corridor of the Manhattan Supreme Court, with a voice loud enough to be heard by the other wives, the lawyers, the court staff, and the security guards, as if I were the one to blame for hoping my husband would show up at the very end of our marriage. I slipped off my wedding ring and dropped it into a clear plastic sleeve, right next to the bank statements. "Let's proceed," I said to my lawyer. A silence fell over that narrow, ravenous hallway. It was the kind of silence that descends on public places when strangers realize someone's private wound has just started bleeding in front of them. A woman in a navy blue suit looked up from her phone. Two middle-aged men by the vending machine stopped talking. Even the security guard by the metal detectors shot a glance in our direction. Alexander's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, stood in front of me as if she owned the building. She wore a cream-colored tailored suit, a pearl necklace, and apricot tangent-colored heels. She wore the exact same expression she adopted whenever she wanted to remind me of my place. At family dinners, charity auctions, holiday gatherings, and once in my own kitchen, when she told me I shouldn't make Alexander feel guilty for coming home late. "You have no shame," Mrs. Sterling said. The old me would have lowered my voice. The old me would have tried to steer the conversation into a corner. The old me would have tried to protect the Sterling name, even as the Sterlings were destroying mine. But the old me had waited for Alexander for 7 years. That morning I had stopped waiting. "I have nothing to be ashamed of," I said. Mrs. Sterling's gaze dropped to the plastic sleeve in my hand. The ring glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courthouse. A thin platinum band. Elegant. Expensive. Discreet. Alexander had chosen it, as he told the jeweler, because I didn't have flashy inclinations. I had smiled. At the time, I thought he meant I was elegant. Only later did I realize he meant I was easy to manage. Mrs. Sterling leaned forward. "Lauren had a threatened miscarriage last week. Alexander is just doing his duty. His duty to attend another woman's gynecological appointment during our divorce hearing. She is the mother of his child," Mrs. Sterling corrected me. The words snapped in the air like a slap. A few people looked away. Others stared more blatantly. It was exactly what Mrs. Sterling wanted. She wanted everyone in that corridor to know that Alexander had already moved on. She wanted everyone to see me as the barren, bitter wife, clinging to a man who was getting ready to have a child with a younger, more malleable, and socially more useful woman. I had lived in that humiliation for months. The first time, when Lauren called Alexander during our anniversary dinner, he stepped outside for 20 minutes and came back smelling of rain and guilt. When I asked what happened, he said she was anxious and had no one to rely on. "No one to rely on?" I repeated. He looked at me over his wine glass. "Don't be so cruel, Julia." The second time, when I found a bottle of prenatal vitamins in the guest bathroom of the Sterling family's Upper East Side townhouse, Alexander said they belonged to his sister. Claire had never used that bathroom. The third time was when Lauren posted a photo on Instagram. The living room of a luxury Tribeca penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, and draped over the sofa was my navy blue Loro Piana cashmere blanket. Alexander told me I was imagining things. Then the bank statements arrived, and the fantasy ended. Looking at Mrs. Sterling now, I didn't see a mother defending her son. I saw a woman defending an investment. Alexander was the heir. Alexander was the family name. Alexander was the kind of man who could fail and ascend endlessly, as long as the women around him quietly cleaned up his messes. Not this time. My lawyer, Sophia Reynolds, stepped out of the courtroom with her leather briefcase tucked under her arm. She was petite, with silver hair and a sharp refinement that made loud people seem vulgar. Her reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. She looked at Mrs. Sterling, then back at me. "Mr. Sterling isn't here?" Sophia asked. "He's at Lauren Vance's ultrasound. Do you have anything in writing?" I unlocked my phone. Alexander's text was still open. "Lauren wants me with her at the clinic. Don't make things complicated. Ask Sophia for a continuance. I'll be there later." Sophia read it once. Her lips didn't move. She read it a second time. Then she said, "Good." Mrs. Sterling's body went rigid. "Excuse me?" Sophia ignored her. "Miss Lawson, do you wish to proceed anyway?" The question was simple, yet far too heavy for everything it carried. I wanted to proceed. I thought back to the night Alexander told me I was overreacting about the wire transfers to the Pinnacle complex in Tribeca. He was in the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, pouring sparkling water into a glass, while I held the bank statement showing 6 monthly debits from our joint account to a property management company I had never heard of. Alexander, what is the Pinnacle Complex? A corporate apartment for who? He had sighed. Julia, it's not even worth answering. It's for some consultants. What consultants? Then he turned. His expression wasn't one of guilt, but of irritation. Don't embarrass yourself over money matters. It doesn't suit you. I thought about our bedroom after I had moved into the guest room. I thought about the empty space in the closet where my silk robe used to hang. I thought about Alexander's family iPad on the kitchen counter, lighting up with a message from Lauren. Does she still think you're at the Chicago site? And Alexander's reply, she'll believe what she wants to believe. That sentence had killed the last crumb of loyalty I had left. I shoved the plastic sleeve into Sophia's hand. Yes, I said. Let's proceed. Mrs. Sterling scoffed. You're making a mistake. I looked her dead in the eye. No, I made a mistake 7 years ago. Today, I'm just fixing it. Her face hardened. A court clerk opened the door and called, Lawson v. Sterling. It was strange hearing my maiden name in a public place after being called Mrs. Sterling for so many years, but it also sounded clean, like an open window after a long winter. We walked into the courtroom. Alexander's lawyer, Mark Foster, stood near the defense table. He was an elegant, soft-spoken man, but he wore the anxious look of a lawyer who has just realized his client hasn't told him enough. He walked quickly over to Sophia. We'll be requesting a continuance, he said. Sophia placed her briefcase on the desk. On what grounds? My client has a family medical emergency. His mistress's OB/GYN ultrasound is not a family medical emergency in this marriage. Attorney Foster's expression tightened. That statement is offensive. It's factually accurate. I sat next to Sophia, placing my purse on the floor. My hands weren't shaking. At first, it surprised me. But then I realized that fear requires uncertainty, and Alexander had finally given me absolute certainty. Judge Bennett, a woman in her 50s, entered the courtroom at exactly 9 a.m. We all stood. She had the serene face and eyes of someone who had seen every human excuse presented in a variety of tailored suits. We sat down. The judge looked at the empty chair next to Attorney Foster. Counselor, where is Mr. Sterling? Foster stood up. Your Honor, my client sleeping with thing this morning due to an urgent medical matter involving a close family member. We respectfully request a continuance. Sophia stood up. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling is attending an obstetric ultrasound with Miss Lauren Vance, with whom he had an affair during the marriage. He texted my client this morning, instructing her to ask for a continuance. A murmur ran through the public gallery. Judge Bennett looked over her glasses. Do you have this text message? Yes, Your Honor. Sophia handed a printed copy to the clerk. Attorney Foster scrambled. Your Honor, there is a fetus involved. My client is currently under considerable emotional distress. Judge Bennett read the message. Mr. Sterling was served notice of this hearing. Sophia countered before Foster could continue. 47 days ago, Your Honor. I have a signed copy of the proof of service. He also referenced today's hearing in an email correspondence with my client and his counsel. He was additionally ordered to submit a full financial disclosure 30 days ago, which he failed to do. The judge turned to Foster. Was your client aware he needed to be here today? Attorney Foster hesitated. The hesitation was costly. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Bennett looked at me. Miss Lawson, do you wish to proceed today? I stood up. The courtroom felt bigger than before. Or maybe I was the one feeling bigger. Yes, Your Honor. You do not request any postponement due to Mr. Sterling's absence? No, Your Honor. Attorney Foster turned slightly toward me. Miss Lawson, perhaps we should step outside and discuss this. For 7 years, the men in Alexander's world had treated me like a soft surface. The wife, the hostess, a woman who could be persuaded if spoken to softly and with a reasonable tone. I looked him straight in the eyes. He had 47 days to discuss it. Sophia's hand rested lightly on her desk. She didn't smile, but I felt her approval. Judge Bennett made a note. The request for a continuance is denied. We will proceed. Behind me, Mrs. Sterling inhaled sharply. That sound was the first victory of my day. Not because she was scared, but because she expected me to fold, and instead, I hadn't even flinched. Sophia opened her first folder. Your Honor, we will begin with the notice and the default. Alexander's empty chair had been facing me for years. His absence used to be a wound. Today, it was evidence. The empty chair became the most eloquent witness in the room. Alexander had always understood that presence is power. When he walked into a high-end restaurant, the maitre d's moved before he even reached the podium. When he walked into a boardroom, older men with more illustrious careers leaned back and listened. When he came home late and tossed his car keys into the artisanal Nantucket ceramic bowl I had bought, the entire house seemed to rearrange itself around him. I rearranged myself too. I would look up from my book, close my laptop, turn off the TV, soften my voice, and ask if he had eaten, if he was tired. If he was angry, I stayed quiet and endured. If he was affectionate, I forgave him in advance. That was the shape of the end. Alexander entered, and Julia adapted. But in court, Alexander's absence didn't create a space for him. It created a consequence. Sophia began with the proof of service. Your Honor, Exhibit A is a signed copy of the proof of service dated March 3rd. Mr. Sterling was served notice of this evidentiary hearing at 9:14 a.m. Exhibit B is an email sent by Mr. Sterling to Miss Lawson on March 4th, describing this hearing as, quote, a waste of everyone's time. Exhibit C is the text message sent to Miss Lawson this morning, instructing her to ask for a continuance because he chose to attend Miss Blank Vance's ultrasound. Judge Bennett examined the documents one by one. Attorney Foster objected twice, once for relevance, once for tone. Both objections were swiftly overruled. Counselor, Judge Bennett said, the court is interested in facts. If the facts are uncomfortable, that is not an admissibility issue. Sophia called me to the witness stand. As I stood up, I felt Mrs. Sterling's glare burning into my back. The heels of my shoes echoed too loudly on the hardwood floor. I sat down, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. The oath felt almost delicate. Wedding vows had been much grander, much more beautiful, and much easier to break. Please state your full name for the record, Sophia said. Julia Lawson. My maiden name anchored me. How long were you married to Mr. Sterling? 7 years. During the marriage, did you contribute financially to the assets now in dispute in these proceedings? Yes. Sophia approached with a document. I am showing the witness the document marked as Exhibit G. Do you recognize it? Yes. It's a bank wire confirmation from my premarital investment account to Sterling Luxury Developments for $250,000. What was Sterling Luxury Developments? A bespoke luxury real estate division that Alexander founded in our second year of marriage. Why did you transfer those funds? Alexander needed capital to secure his first independent construction project. His father refused to provide further funding unless Alexander gave up operational control. Alexander asked me to invest privately so he could maintain control and avoid embarrassment. Attorney Foster stood up. Objection. Speculating on motives from a private conversation. Sophia didn't even look at him. The witness is testifying to what Mr. Sterling told her. Judge Bennett nodded. Overruled. Sophia continued. Did you and Mr. Sterling draft a contract regarding those funds? Yes. What were the terms of that contract? That my investment would be repaid with interest in the event of a divorce, or converted into a 5% equity stake in Sterling Luxury Developments. Sophia handed the document to the clerk. Exhibit H, Your Honor. It contains the signatures of both parties. Attorney Foster stared at his copy, as if staring long enough might turn it into something else. Counselor, Judge Bennett asked, was this contract included in Mr. Sterling's financial disclosures? No, Your Honor, Sophia answered. Foster cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client contests the enforceability of that agreement. The judge looked at him. You may contest its enforceability, but you cannot omit the existence of the contract itself. Attorney Foster sat down. I kept my eyes fixed on the judge, not on Mrs. Sterling. If I looked at Mrs. Sterling for too long, I might remember all the times I had heard her smiling at guests and saying, Alexander built everything himself. Everything. The house I had restored, the client dinners I had hosted, the investors I had charmed, the first project I had funded. Alexander had built it all himself because I was never supposed to be acknowledged. Sophia placed another document in front of me. Do you recognize Exhibit I? Yes, it's a copy of the initial budget for Sterling Luxury Development's first project. The margin notes are in my handwriting. In addition to investing the funds, what kind of work did you do for that project? I selected the finishes, hired 2 key vendors, designed the interior of the model unit, organized the first walkthrough for investors, and prepared the presentation boards for clients. Were you paid for this work? No. Why not? Alexander said it was for us. Silence in the courtroom. For us? How many women had been forced to work for nothing? Packaged within those two words. For us meant my work became his reputation. For us meant my money became his leverage. For us meant my silence became his peace. Sophia let those words ring out before continuing. When did you first realize that Mr. Sterling had undervalued the total worth of Sterling Luxury Developments in this divorce? After my lawyer obtained the company's ledgers and hired a forensic accountant. What had Mr. Sterling told you up until that point? That the division was drowning in debt and bleeding cash, and that it was worth much less than I thought. And you believed him for a while? Yes. Because I looked at Alexander's empty chair. Because he was my husband. And I wanted to believe that, at least on some things, he wouldn't lie to me. Behind me, I heard Mrs. Sterling shift in her seat. Sophia's voice softened slightly. What made you change your mind? I found an email he had printed by mistake. Sophia introduced the email as evidence. It was in the printer tray of our shared home office 3 weeks before I filed for divorce. I had come home early because a client canceled an appointment. The house was empty. I went to print some paint swatches and found a letter from Alexander to his CFO. Don't send the full ledgers for Sterling Luxury yet. Julia's lawyer is fishing. We'll handle it post-trial. At the time, I hadn't formally retained Sophia yet. Alexander was anticipating my ignorance before I had even decided to end it. Sophia read it out loud. Attorney Foster objected for lack of evidentiary foundation. Meticulously, Sophia established the printer, the shared office, the email header information, and the identical copy legally obtained through discovery from the CFO's account. She turned my discovery into an undeniable court fact. Judge Bennett's fountain pen moved across her notepad. The sound became music. Then came the bank statements. Sophia approached with a thick stack of papers. Miss Lawson, do you recognize these accounts? Yes. They include our joint checking account, a home equity line of credit, HELOC, on our Brooklyn Heights brownstone, and 2 corporate accounts linked to Sterling Luxury Developments. When did you first discover the wire transfers to the Pinnacle Complex in January? Sophia asked. What is the Pinnacle Complex? A luxury residential high-rise in Tribeca, I answered. Did you live there? No. Did Mr. Sterling ever tell you he owned or rented a unit there? No. Who lived there? Miss Lauren Vance. Attorney Foster stood up. Objection. Speculation. Sophia held up another document. We obtained the lease agreement, the rider, the building's key fob access logs, and a sworn affidavit from the building's concierge. Overruled for the purposes of this hearing, Judge Bennett said, Sophia asked. And how much money was transferred from marital assets to the Pinnacle Complex? Approximately $80,000 over 8 months. Did you consent to these transfers? No. While your husband was telling you these transfers were business expenses, were you aware that Miss Vance lived there? No. What did Mr. Sterling say when you asked him about this? I swallowed hard. There were phrases that seemed harmless the first time you heard them, but later revealed themselves to be a prison. He said, Don't embarrass yourself over money matters. It doesn't suit you. Nobody in the courtroom gasped. That almost never happens in real life. But something in the air shifted. I saw a woman in the back row press her lips together. I saw Judge Bennett shoot a brief glance at Alexander's empty chair. I saw Sophia pause, letting the insult become evidence not just of cruelty, but of control. I have no further questions on this subject for now, Sophia said. Attorney Foster waived cross-examination at this stage, perhaps because his client was absent and his documents were incomplete. As I stepped down from the witness stand, my cell phone buzzed. It was Alexander. I looked at Sophia. She nodded. I opened the text. Where are you guys at? Tell Sophia to go slow. Leaving soon. Go slow. Even now, he expected the world to wait for him. I placed the phone face down on the desk. Sophia leaned in and whispered, Don't answer. I had no intention of doing so. She studied my face for a brief second, then smiled. Well done. Alexander used to say I had expensive tastes. He'd say it at dinner when guests admired the travertine fireplace in our Brooklyn Heights brownstone. He'd say it when clients praised the design of the model unit I staged for Sterling Luxury Developments. He'd say it when Mrs. Sterling asked why I had the wallpaper for the powder room artisanally shipped from Italy instead of ordering from a catalog. Julia has slightly expensive tastes, Alexander would say, his hand resting on the small of my back. Everyone laughed. No one asked who paid. In court, Sophia made sure everyone asked who paid. She started with the Brooklyn Heights house. Miss Lawson, I'd like to discuss the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. Just the address made something inside me tighten. That house had been the first home I truly loved as an adult. It was an old historic brownstone with arched doorways, original hardwood floors, obsolete plumbing, and a backyard that had surrendered to weeds. Alexander hated it at first. It's impractical, he had said. He wanted a modern glass penthouse in Manhattan with a wine cellar and a heated driveway. I walked through the dusty living room in Brooklyn Heights and watched the morning light settle on the herringbone floors. It just needs someone to care for it, I told him then, thinking I was talking about the house. Sophia handed me the original purchase agreement. Whose name is on the initial offer? Mine. For what reason? Alexander's credit was tied up in commercial development loans, so I used my premarital funds for the down payment and escrow. How much did that amount to? 15万美元. Was Mr. Sterling's name subsequently added to the deed? Yes. Why? He asked to be added for estate planning and tax purposes. He said it would avoid legal complications if anything happened to me. Sophia introduced an email as evidence. It's still your house, Julia. I just want to avoid legal headaches if anything happens to you. I remembered feeling loved, protected, and chosen when I received that email. Only now did I understand that some traps are built with reasonable language. Sophia then moved on to the renovation ledgers. $100,000 for structural work. $40,000 for custom cabinetry. $20,000 for the roof replacement. $15,000 for plasterwork. $35,000 for landscaping. Smaller invoices followed. Vintage brass hardware, antique sconces, imported stone, window restoration, paint, floor sanding, even the cost of repairing a burst pipe in the winter that Alexander had forgotten to manage. How were these works paid for? Sophia asked. With earnings from my interior design business, my premarital savings, and our joint account, which I contributed to. Did Mr. Sterling ever reimburse you for these costs? No. Did he ever mention that these contributions would reduce his ownership stake? No. Did he ever publicly present this house as a gift he had given you? I looked down at the papers in my lap. Yes. Where? In interviews with the press, at client dinners, at family events. What did he say? I took a breath. He said he bought me the house because I see the beauty in broken things. The phrase was unbearably awful to hear in a courtroom. For years, I thought it was romantic. Now it sounded like a confession. Sophia turned to the judge. Your Honor, Exhibit S is an article from a luxury shelter magazine featuring Mr. Palson Deberue, Sterling, in which he states, quote, I gifted my wife the Brooklyn Heights brownstone as a blank canvas. The article omits Miss Lawson's purchase funds, design labor, and construction contributions. Attorney Foster stood up. Your Honor, a magazine article has little to no evidentiary value. The judge looked at Sophia. I am not submitting it to establish ownership, Your Honor, Sophia said. I am submitting it to establish a pattern of misrepresentation regarding contribution and ownership. Admitted for that limited purpose, Judge Bennett ruled. Behind me, Mrs. Sterling's cell phone buzzed. She put it on silent too late. Judge Bennett glared at her, and she looked down. That scene alone felt historic. Next, Sophia called George Carter to the stand. He was a white-haired forensic accountant, with reading glasses and the calm exhaustion of a man who had seen too many spouses mistake secrecy for intelligence. He sat down and explained his fund tracing report. Mr. Carter, Sophia said, what records did you review? Bank statements, credit reports, property deeds, wire transfers, corporate ledgers, email evidence, and subpoenaed records from the Pinnacle Complex, the Serenity Maternity Clinic on the Upper East Side, and 2 shell companies. What conclusions did you draw regarding the home equity line of credit, HELOC, on the Brooklyn Heights property, that Mr. Sterling opened or increased a line of credit secured by the house and used a portion of those funds for expenses entirely unrelated to the property? Can you specify those expenses? Yes. The funds moved from the HELOC to Sterling Luxury Development's operating account, and then to a shell company called Vance Consulting. From there, expenses were paid for rent at the Pinnacle complex, a luxury car lease for a Range Rover, medical bills at Serenity Maternity Clinic, and various retail accounts. Who owns Vance Consulting? Lauren Vance. Tension rippled through the courtroom. Attorney Foster tried to intervene. Your Honor, this could be a legitimate consulting contract. Sophia held up a separate document. The invoices issued for Vance Consulting were created after the start of discovery and were backdated. Mr. Carter can testify to the metadata if necessary. Judge Bennett looked at Foster. Do you wish to press this objection? No, Your Honor. Foster sat down. George Carter described the metadata anyway creation dates, modification dates, template discrepancies, out-of-sequence invoice numbers, post-dated payments. It was no longer just a romantic betrayal. It was accounting fraud committed in a tailored suit. I looked at Mrs. Sterling. Her face was pale. People like her could forgive infidelity. In their world, it was just expected bad weather for powerful men. But messy accounting was different. Messy accounting threatened reputations, board seats, donors, tax attorneys, country club memberships, and invitations. Did you find undeclared dividends from Sterling Luxury Developments? Sophia asked Carter. Yes. Approximately how much? Based on current records, a minimum of $1.3 million in dividends or equivalent personal benefits were omitted from Mr. Sterling's initial financial disclosure. Attorney Foster's pen stopped moving. Judge Bennett looked up. Did you say a minimum? She asked. Carter nodded. Not all discovery documents have been produced yet. Sophia let that fact settle over the room, then asked, Is there any mention of Miss Lawson's equity stake in the internal ledgers? Yes. She submitted the initial internal valuation as evidence. My name appeared in a footnote. Julia Lawson's 5% equity stake pending conversion. I stared at it until the letters blurred. For years, Alexander had told me I misunderstood. That there was no real ownership. That the contract was symbolic. That it was just because I wanted to feel involved. That business was complicated, and he would explain it when things settled down. But there it was. My name not as a wife, a hostess, or a decoration, but as equity. A strange sadness washed over me. Not because I wanted the money more than the marriage, but because Alexander knew. He knew I had a legal right. He knew I had built a part of his success. And yet, he had looked me straight in the eye and spoken to me as if I were greedy for asking questions. After Carter stepped down, Sophia turned back to me. Miss Lawson, did Mr. Sterling ever tell you your equity was specified in the company's internal ledgers? No. Did he ever tell you he removed or omitted mentions of your equity from subsequent filings? No. Did he encourage you to rely on him for understanding the business? Yes. What would he tell you? I looked at the empty chair. He'd say, You're a genius with spaces, Julia. Let me handle the numbers. It sounded so kind. That was the worst part. Some prisons are wrapped in a compliment. Sophia nodded. Miss Lawson, why did you file this lawsuit? Attorney Foster stood up. Objection. Relevance. Overruled, Judge Bennett said. Answer briefly. I looked at the judge. Because for years, Mr. Sterling told people he gave me everything, while in reality, he was using the things I gave him to build a life with another woman. I am not asking for a reward. I am asking that the records match reality. Sophia sat down. No further questions. As I walked back to my seat, my cell phone buzzed again. Alexander. Another text. Seriously, Julia? Don't let Sophia turn this into a circus. I'm almost there. A circus. That was what he called the truth once other people could hear it. I showed it to Sophia. She took a photo of the message and whispered, Let's keep going. And so I did. The first time I found Lauren's hair in our bathroom, Alexander said I was imagining things. It was long and honey blonde, tangled around the drain of the shower I had personally designed with handmade artisanal blue tiles. My hair was dark, cut sharply at the shoulders. Our housekeeper, Elena's hair was black. His sister Claire's hair was brown. Alexander looked at the hair as if it were a nuisance, not evidence. The cleaning lady probably left it, he said. Elena has black hair. He rubbed his face. Julia, I've had a terrible day. This isn't an answer. His voice turned cold. Are we really going to make a scene over a hair? In the end, we didn't. He went to bed. I stayed up, barefoot on the tiles I had bought, realizing something I wasn't yet ready to say out loud. Betrayal doesn't always look like lipstick on a collar. Sometimes it looks like a single strand of hair, and the man who demands you apologize for finding it. In court, Sophia called Elena to the stand. She had worked for us part-time for 4 years. She was a petite, solid woman in her 50s, possessing the calm demeanor of someone who had survived a lifetime around people with voices that were too loud. Alexander liked her because she kept the house impeccable. Mrs. Sterling liked her because she was discreet. Both of them mistook her silence for loyalty to them. Elena took the oath and sat down, hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Elena, Sophia said, did you work at the Sterling residence in Brooklyn Heights during their marriage? Yes. Did you ever see Miss Lauren Vance at that residence? Yes. How many times? Elena looked at me once. Her eyes were apologetic, but her voice was firm. At least 9 times. Behind me, Mrs. Sterling let out a small sound, like a wounded animal. Sophia continued. Was Miss Lawson present during these visits? No. Do you recall when these visits occurred? Mainly when Mrs. Julia was traveling for work. Chicago, Boston, D.C. Sometimes when she was in client meetings. I remembered those trips. Chicago, where I had designed a boutique hotel lobby for a client, who later signed a massive contract with Alexander's firm. Boston, where I ate dinner alone in my hotel room after speaking at a conference because Alexander said he had a board dinner. D.C., where I helped my sister-in-law with a charity event because Mrs. Sterling insisted that family handles family events. While I was working, Lauren was walking through my house. Did Miss Vance appear to be a business guest? Sophia asked. No. Why not? Elena's lips tightened. She wore Mrs. Julia's silk robe. She ate breakfast in the kitchen. She used the upstairs master bathroom. Mr. Sterling told me to wash the sheets in the guest room and not say anything. The words hit a spot inside me that I thought was already numb. My robe, my kitchen, my sheets, my house. Did Mr. Sterling ever explain why? Sophia asked. He said Mrs. Julia was sensitive and might misunderstand. I almost laughed. Misunderstand. Alexander's favorite word for when I understood something entirely too clearly. Next, Sophia introduced security camera footage as evidence. It had been my idea to install a camera near the side entrance after a string of package thefts. Alexander had complained about the cost, then promptly forgot it existed because he didn't care about household operations unless they made him look magnanimous. The footage played on the courtroom screen. Tuesday, 7:42 p.m. Lauren stepping out of Alexander's black Range Rover. Him walking around and placing a hand on her lower back. Lauren laughing. Lauren entering through the side door carrying an overnight bag. The screen switched. Another date. Lauren leaving the house carrying one of my canvas tote bags. Another clip. Alexander directing 2 movers as they carried a wrapped painting out of the dining room. My painting. A charcoal sketch of the New York City skyline I had bought after completing my first major solo interior design project. I remembered being so excited I couldn't wait for delivery, loading it into the backseat of my car. Alexander had helped me hang it. He had said it made the dining room feel like a real room, not just a pretty one. And now, the screen showed him taking it down for her. Did you witness personal items being removed from the Brooklyn Heights house? The lawyer asked Elena. Yes. What items? Artwork, lamps, dining chairs, a blanket, dishware, even some clothes. Did Miss Lawson authorize this removal? No. What did Mr. Sterling say? Elena looked down, then back up. He said Lauren needed some things so her penthouse wouldn't feel like a temporary place. A temporary place. The words cut through the courtroom like blades. So Lauren, in order to feel at home, needed my art, my personal belongings, my furniture, my husband, and my silence. Judge Bennett watched the footage expressionlessly, which was even more lethal for Alexander. If she had gotten angry, his lawyer would have had a foothold. Calm meant she was simply logging facts. Sophia showed photos of the interior of the Tribeca penthouse. My dining chairs around Lauren's glass table, my navy blue cashmere blanket draped over her velvet sofa, my brass reading lamp next to her bed, and on a sideboard, my framed photograph of the Nantucket shoreline, That photo had been a gift from Alexander for our 3rd anniversary. We had spent a long November weekend on Nantucket, eating clam chowder, walking in the sea breeze, and pretending we hadn't started fighting about kids, money, and time. On the final morning, Alexander had bought that photo in a small gallery. "So, wherever we grow old, we'll do it together," he had said. Now, it was sitting on a sideboard in Lauren's rented apartment. I didn't cry. That was the thing that surprised people when they heard the story later. They expected tears. They wanted the betrayal to be wet and cinematic, but I was beyond tears. I was making a list. Sophia called me back to the stand briefly. "Miss Lawson, did Mr. Sterling ever tell you your personal items had been moved to Miss Vance's residence?" "No." "What did he tell you when you asked about the missing items?" "That I was being forgetful." "Did he ever express concern about your memory in other circumstances?" "Only when I noticed things he wanted to deny." Attorney Foster stood up. "Objection. Characterization. Sustained regarding characterization," Judge Bennett said. "The response is limited to the first sentence." I nodded. "Understood." Sophia continued. "Did you file a police report for the missing items?" "No." "Why not?" "At the time, I was still trying to understand what was happening. Alexander said involving the police would be humiliating for both of us. He said I was being emotional. Are you now requesting the return or compensation for those items?" "Yes." "Which item is most important to you?" I paused. The honest answer wasn't the most expensive one. The painting. The Nantucket photograph. My grandmother's dining chairs. The blue blanket. Why? Because before they were used to make another woman comfortable, they were mine. Sophia gave a brief nod. No further questions. As I stepped down from the stand, the courtroom door opened briefly. A clerk stepped aside. Alexander stood in the doorway. He was panting, his tie slightly askew, the clinic visitor sticker still stuck to his lapel. Serenity Maternity Clinic visitors. 103. Everyone saw it. For the first time all day, Alexander physically appeared in that space. And for the first time in our marriage, his appearance changed nothing. Alexander hated arriving late. Not because it was rude, but because it meant a space had been allowed to exist without him. He stood at the back of the courtroom, scanning faces to assess the damage. His gaze went from Judge Bennett to Attorney Foster, to Sophia, to the screen, to the evidence box, to me. For a second, his eyes locked on the frozen frame on the screen. Lauren's apartment. My blue blanket. His face shifted not with shame, but calculation. The court went into a brief recess, and a bailiff stepped forward before Alexander could cross the bar. "Sir, we are in recess. You must wait. I'm Alexander Sterling." The bailiff looked at his visitor sticker, then at his face. "Yes, you still have to wait." A few people in the gallery looked down to hide their expressions. Alexander was not used to being treated as an ordinary nuisance. He turned to me. "Julia." Sophia stepped between us. "Do not address my client directly." Alexander's lips tightened. "Is she still my wife?" "No," I said, "but this is still your hearing." The words hit him harder than I expected. Mrs. Sterling rushed toward him from the gallery, her heels clicking. Alexander whispered, though everyone could hear, "They have the bank transfers. Elena, the house documents, everything." His gaze fixed on his mother. Elena testified. Mrs. Sterling nodded. For the first time, I saw a flash of pure panic on his face. Alexander had expected the bank statements, maybe the emails, maybe my angry testimony. He had never imagined that the quiet woman who folded our towels could become a witness against him. That was Alexander's mistake. He didn't pay attention to the people he considered background noise. And Elena paid attention to everything. Attorney Foster hurried over. "Mr. Sterling, we need to speak outside." "Now." Alexander ignored him. "Julia, what the hell have you done?" Such a classic Alexander question. Not what happened, but what have you done? As if the consequences were an invention I had cooked up. I looked at the hospital sticker on his coat. "I came to court," I said. His jaw clenched. The bailiff called everyone to order. We stood as Judge Bennett returned. Alexander moved to sit next to Foster, but Sophia stood up first. "Your Honor, before Mr. Sterling participates further, I would like to address the matter of sanctions for his late appearance. His failure to be present at the scheduled time, and his non-compliance with court orders. Alexander shot Sophia a glaring look. Sanctions? Judge Bennett turned to him. Mr. Sterling, this hearing began at 9 a.m. I understand, Your Honor. I apologize. There was a medical emergency involving my unborn child. The phrase was rehearsed. He had practiced it in the car. The judge looked at the sticker on his lapel. Were you the patient? Alexander blinked. No, Your Honor. Miss Vance was unable to undergo an ultrasound unaccompanied. He hesitated. The hesitation was fleeting, but the damage was fatal. No, Your Honor, but she was anxious. There was a concerning episode last week. This court does not reschedule evidentiary hearings to accommodate personal emotional preferences, Judge Bennett stated. Alexander's face darkened. He was used to judges from exclusive social clubs, judges who were dinner guests, judges who shook his father's hand, John Sterling, the chairman at charity galas. He was not used to this kind of judge. In this courtroom, with these documents, your counsel requested a continuance, which was denied, the judge continued. The hearing proceeded. You may participate from this point forward, but you may not relitigate testimony or evidence already admitted because you chose not to be present. Alexander looked at Attorney Foster. Foster looked down. Sophia immediately moved to file a temporary restraining order, TRO, on his finances. Your Honor, given the evidence presented regarding omitted dividends, backdated invoices, and marital assets diverted to Miss Vance or an entity she controls, we request an immediate order freezing further transfers from the disputed accounts, prohibiting further encumbrances on the Brooklyn Heights property, preserving all records of Sterling luxury developments, and barring the disposal of any personal property removed from the marital residence. Alexander stood up. Your Honor, this would severely damage ongoing business operations. Sophia flipped a page in her folder. Business operations were damaged when marital assets were diverted to pay the rent for Miss Vance's penthouse. That is not what happened, Alexander argued. There was that old tone in his voice, the one that used absolute certainty as a substitute for the truth. Mr. Sterling, Judge Bennett said, sit down, unless you are testifying or instructed by your attorney. He sat down slowly. Sophia projected the fund tracing diagram prepared by George Carter onto the screen. It was clean and ruthless. The HELOC on the house, Sterling Luxury's operating account, Vance Consulting, the Tribeca penthouse rent, the Range Rover lease, the Upper East Side clinic, the luxury shopping sprees. Every single arrow bypassed me and pointed directly to Lauren. Attorney Foster tried to argue that Vance Consulting provided legitimate branding services. Sophia countered by showing the metadata of the invoices and the complete lack of any corresponding work product. The court does not need to decide the final issues today, Sophia said. It only needs to prevent further harm while we proceed with final valuations. Judge Bennett granted the temporary freeze. Alexander's hand gripped his fountain pen so hard the sound of cracking plastic was audible across the courtroom. Mrs. Sterling bowed her head. Next, Sophia entered the text messages from Alexander's family iPad into evidence. Pick whatever you want for the penthouse. Julia won't even notice half that stuff is missing anyway. The message appeared on the screen. Alexander stared at it. I remembered the night I found it. I couldn't sleep in the Brooklyn Heights house. I had gone downstairs to make tea. His iPad was on the kitchen island, still logged into his messages. I wasn't snooping, I had told myself for months. I was just looking for the grocery list. Lauren's name lit up the screen. Does she still think you're at the Chicago site? And Alexander's reply, she'll believe what she wants to believe. I didn't confront him that night. I took a photo, made my tea, and sat in the dark kitchen until the sun came up, realizing that a breaking heart could be quiet enough not to wake the house. Sophia established that the iPad was a shared family device. Alexander had given me the passcode years prior. The messages had been preserved before the device was removed from the home. Attorney Foster objected, citing privacy violations. Judge Bennett admitted the messages for the limited purpose of showing the disposition of property and assets. Alexander leaned toward Foster, whispering harshly. Foster's face remained impassive. When the court adjourned for the lunch break, Alexander looked more like a trapped animal than an angry man. That was when he followed me into the corridor. Julia, wait. Keep walking, Sophia said. I kept walking. Alexander's voice rose. Are you trying to ruin me? I stopped. The courthouse corridor was crowded now. People from other cases walked past us. A woman was crying near the elevators. A man in a wrinkled shirt argued in hushed tones with his lawyer. A child clutching a stuffed rabbit stared at me with wide eyes. I turned around. No. I am refusing to continue funding the life you built by ruining mine. Alexander looked at me as if he didn't recognize my voice. Maybe he didn't. For years, I had spoken to him in a blunted voice, with caution, offering questions instead of accusations. This was the voice I had before the marriage excised it from me. He took a step closer. Can we fix this? No. You can comply with the court orders. His eyes flared. You're having fun, aren't you? I'm surviving. You could have waited. There it was. The summary of that entire morning, of that entire marriage. You could have waited. I looked at the hospital sticker still on his lapel. I did wait, I said. For 7 years. And I turned my back on him. The summons from Mrs. Sterling arrived via courier. No text, no email, no call. A cream-colored envelope with my name written in elegant calligraphy delivered to the apartment building I had moved into exactly 17 days ago. Julia Lawson. Not Mrs. Sterling. I knew from that alone how furious she was. Inside was thick cardstock. Family dinner. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. We need to resolve this privately before you do any more damage. Not a request. Not an apology. Not a question. A summons. I took a photo and sent it to Sophia. Her reply came a minute later. Go. I called her immediately. Absolutely not. They are desperate, Sophia answered, the sound of pages turning in the background. That is not a reason to let myself be cornered over grilled salmon with 6 members of the Sterling family. It is, if you stop thinking like a daughter-in-law and start thinking like a witness. I looked at the letter again. They'll try to guilt-trip me. Yes. They'll probably try to scare me. Probably. Lauren will almost certainly be there. I closed my eyes. Why should I subject myself to this? Because desperate people talk a lot, and because you need to see, in person, exactly what they are demanding you stay silent for. So I went. Not because I owed them another dinner. Not because I believed in closure, a word people use when they want pain to behave politely. I went prepared. My phone was fully charged. Sophia knew exactly when I'd arrive. Claire had texted me separately. Are you okay? I didn't reply, not yet knowing if she was reaching out as herself or as a Sterling. The family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut sat on a hill, a sprawling compound of glass, stone, and inherited confidence. I had attended birthdays, holiday dinners, charity luncheons, and engagement parties there. And once, during a family dinner, Mrs. Sterling had criticized my floral arrangements in front of 20 guests. Usually, I arrived at the front door with a gift. That night, I arrived with documents. The dining room was set for 6. Mrs. Sterling sat at the head of the table. John Sterling, the chairman, a quiet, silver-haired man who believed silence made him neutral, when in reality, it only served whoever had the loudest voice sat at the opposite end. Alexander stood near the credenza with a glass of bourbon. Claire sat midway down the table, pale and tense. Lauren arrived 3 minutes after I did. She wore a pale blue dress that just barely skimmed her bump. She wasn't pregnant enough to need maternity wear, but she was dressed for pregnancy as if it were a political office. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves. Her makeup was delicate. Her eyes were reddened in a way that looked studied. Alexander moved to pull out her chair. He had never pulled out my chair in that dining room. I noticed it not because I wanted to, but because evidence isn't always on paper. Before the appetizers even arrived, Mrs. Sterling started. Julia, thank you for coming. You summoned me. John's eyes flicked up. Mrs. Sterling's smile tightened. Are we still family? She asked. No, I said. We are opposing parties in a legal dispute. Alexander slammed his glass down. Do you have to talk like your lawyer? Because now I have to be clear. Lauren placed a hand on her belly. I hope we can keep things calm. Extreme stress isn't good for the baby. I looked at her. Then Alexander should stop creating the legal liabilities causing the dispute. Her lips parted. Mrs. Sterling's voice turned sharp. There's no need to attack Lauren. I'm not attacking her. Mentioning legal liabilities is a fact, not an attack. I saw Claire quickly look down, but not fast enough to hide that she had almost smiled. Dinner was served. No one ate much. Next, John tried. Julia, legal proceedings can be destructive. Do you know how fast a reputation can be ruined? Yes, I said. Mine has been ruined for months while Alexander was telling people I was mentally unstable. When did I ever use that word? Alexander snapped. No, you used emotional, sensitive, confused, bitter, vindictive. You're right. You used words. Alexander told me you two had been emotionally separated for a long time, Lauren whispered. I turned to her. Did he tell you that while he was paying your rent with my home equity line of credit? Her face flushed. Julia. Alexander's voice rose. I looked at him. Alexander. Silence fell over the table. For years, that tone would have been enough to stop me. That night, it only served to confirm exactly where to apply pressure. Mrs. Sterling put down her soup spoon. Let's be realistic. A baby is coming. That child is innocent. Yes, I said. The child is innocent, which is why the adults should stop using it as a shield while committing financial fraud. Lauren's softness vanished. Mrs. Sterling leaned forward. You want Alexander punished. I want the ledgers produced. You want the money. I want an acknowledgement of the situation, the equity, and the restitution of my assets. You're full of resentment. I pulled a folder out of my bag and placed it next to my plate. Alexander stared at it. What is that? Copies. Mrs. Sterling's expression shifted. She recognized the danger. Maybe that was the only thing we had in common. I opened the folder and pulled out the first email. It was from Mrs. Sterling to Alexander. Don't rush the divorce. If Julia realizes how tied the Brooklyn Heights house is to the business, she'll start digging. Keep her emotional. Emotional women make stupid legal decisions. John slowly raised his head. Mom, Claire whispered. Mrs. Sterling's face paled, then hardened. That is private family correspondence. No, I said. It's evidence. Alexander reached across the table for the paper. I let him take it. It was worth attending that dinner, just to watch him read his mother's petty calculation through my hands. Mrs. Sterling regained her composure. I was only trying to protect my son. You were helping your son manipulate his wife. I did no such thing. I placed a second document on the table. This time, it was from Mrs. Sterling to the family accountant. Delay sending any non-essential bank statements until things calm down. There's no need for Julia to see every internal corporate document. John reached for it himself. His jaw clenched as he read. His wife turned to him. John, don't look at me like that. I was just trying to avoid unnecessary complications. No, I said. You were trying to obstruct the discovery of information. Alexander stood up. Enough. I looked up at him. Sit down. His eyes went wide. No one spoke. Alexander didn't sit down, but he didn't step closer, either. Lauren stood up, leaning against her chair. I don't think I need to be here. Yes, you do, I said. Some of that money was funneled through your shell company. Her face changed so rapidly that even Alexander noticed. It was panic. Not guilt, not anger, panic over the repercussions on her. Alexander turned to her. Lauren. She pressed her hand to her belly. I don't feel well. Mrs. Sterling stood up. Do you see what you're doing, Julia? You're endangering a pregnant woman? No, I said, standing up. I'm endangering a lie. I gathered my papers. Alexander's voice dropped dangerously low. If you keep this up, you're going to make enemies you can't afford. I stopped, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. Can you repeat what you just said? His face froze. I wasn't recording our dinner. The consent laws in the US can be complex, and Sophia had warned me not to be reckless. But Alexander didn't know if I was recording or not, and the uncertainty was far more powerful than a tape. Alexander, don't say another word, Mrs. Sterling said sharply. For once, he listened. I slipped the papers back into my bag. Have a good evening. Claire followed me to the foyer. Sister-in-law, she whispered. I stopped at the front door. Her hands were curled into tight fists. I know where my brother keeps the old physical ledgers for the company. My heartbeat shifted. You should have told me earlier, Claire. I know. She flinched. I didn't apologize. Women like us apologized entirely too much. I handed her Sophia's business card. Call when you're ready. As I walked down the driveway to my car, I looked back once through the dining room window. Alexander was standing near the table alone, while Lauren collapsed into his mother's arms. For the first time, no one was comforting him. The next morning, Claire arrived at Sophia's office in Manhattan without makeup, carrying a heavy cardboard box of documents. I knew from that alone how serious she was. Sterling women never appeared in public looking anything less than flawless, unless their interior had irrevocably collapsed. Claire's hair was pulled back in a simple elastic. Her eyes were puffy. She wore jeans and a gray sweater, wearing the expression of someone who had spent the entire night deciding which version of herself she could live with. "I'm sorry," she said before she even sat down. Sophia was not gentle. For what exactly? Claire blinked. I loved Sophia for that. She didn't let apologies turn into a convenient fog. Claire looked at me. For believing my brother, for not understanding that you were angry not because you were hurt, but because you were right, for letting my mother talk about you as if you were unstable. I sat across from her. Thank you, I said. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. Claire placed the box on the conference table. My brother keeps the old physical documents in a side cabinet in his office. He thinks nobody looks at them because everything is digitized now. But Dad still insists on hard copies of important internal valuations. Sophia opened the box. Inside were neat manila folders sorted by fiscal year, funding rounds, internal valuations, investor pitch decks, and one thin folder labeled Brooklyn Heights. My throat tightened. Sophia reached for the Brooklyn Heights folder first. There it was again. The contract. The internal valuation document acknowledging the conversion of my 5% equity, and the revised version of that exact same document with my name scrubbed from it. Sophia looked at Claire. Can you authenticate the provenance of these documents? Yes. Do you understand your family might retaliate? Claire offered a small, bitter smile. My family has been retaliating against honesty my entire life. At least this time, I asked for it. I looked at her differently then. Not as Alexander's sister or Eleanor's daughter, but as another woman in that house who had to learn how to survive through silence. Sophia sorted the stacks. This will be tremendously helpful, she said. Claire looked at me. My brother told us your investment was symbolic. Of course he did. That you just wanted to feel included in the business. I wanted a contract with specific repayment terms because my father taught me never to put money into a venture without paperwork. Claire's lips trembled slightly. Typical you. Yes. It was one of the strangest agonies of divorce. Discovering that the version of myself I had abandoned was much wiser than the one I had tried so hard to be loved as. That afternoon, the lie about paternity unraveled. It started with David Gallagher. Sophia put the call on speakerphone after confirming he consented to being recorded. He sounded irritated before a single question was even asked. I don't want to get dragged into rich people's divorce drama, he said. Sophia's tone remained mild. Then answer the questions truthfully and briefly. Silence. Fine. David had dated Lauren before Alexander came back into the picture. He ran a boutique event planning agency and had once collaborated with Sterling Luxury Developments. That was how Sophia had found the connection to Vance Consulting. Mr. Gallagher, Sophia said. Did Miss Vance ever discuss Mr. Sterling's finances with you? Yeah. When? Last fall. Around October. Alexander had told me their affair started in December. I wrote that down. What did she say? Sophia asked. David sighed. She said Alexander Sterling was her way out. Her words, not mine. A way out of what? Debt. A bad commercial lease. And, well, she mentioned Miss Lawson. Not by name. She said he had a wife who was tangled up in the company's business, but that he could control her. My pen stopped. Control her. Alexander's marital philosophy. Sophia continued. Did Miss Vance tell you she was pregnant? Later. Yeah. Did she specify it was Mr. Sterling's? Another silence. Maybe, he said. The word landed softly and then expanded uncontrollably. Maybe. Sophia didn't look at me, but I felt the air in the room shift. Even Claire's eyes widened. Are you implying there is another potential father? Sophia asked. I'm not saying it's me. Nobody asked. David mumbled something, then added. She asked me if I remembered that luxury resort weekend in Napa Valley. Sophia's pen scratched across her notepad. When was Napa Valley? The first weekend of November. I remembered that weekend. Alexander had arrived late to the Greenwich estate, kissed my cheek in the foyer, and told his mother traffic on the Merritt Parkway was awful. Lauren was likely in Napa Valley, maybe with David. I waited for the rage to rise. It came, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't jealousy, it was disgust at the architecture of the lie. Alexander had used the pregnancy as the ultimate moral high ground, as if a biological fact could wash away his betrayal. Lauren had used uncertainty as leverage, letting him believe whatever was most advantageous for him to believe. Mrs. Sterling had weaponized the unborn child against me. The fetus had been reduced to a shield for the adult's greed. Sophia ended the call after David confirmed he would provide a sworn written statement and make himself available for deposition if necessary. When the line clicked dead, she turned to me. "We are not making paternity our primary issue, Julia." "I know. I mean it," she repeated. "The heart of this case isn't the baby. It's the money." Sophia studied me. "Well, my brother knows," Claire whispered. "We don't know that," Sophia said. "And we don't need to know it, unless it becomes relevant to the financial disclosures." That restraint saved me. It would have been easy to chase the humiliation. It would have been easy to become the bitter, vindictive wife Alexander wanted the court to see. It would have been easy to drag Lauren's body, her pregnancy, and her private life to the center of the courtroom, but doing so would have lightened the weight of the choices Alexander had made. I wasn't going to give him that reprieve. He had stolen my money. He had lied to the court. He had hidden assets. He had used my home to fund another woman's life. That was enough. That evening, I went to the Serenity Maternity Clinic on the Upper East Side to retrieve my old Honda Civic. Alexander had taken my Range Rover after I moved out, claiming it was safer for Lauren. My old car had been sitting in the clinic parking lot for 2 days. It was still under my name, and Sophia had told me to get it before Alexander found an excuse to make it disappear. I arrived at dusk. The clinic was a low, discreet brick building with soft lighting and privacy hedges. I was walking across the asphalt when I heard Lauren's voice. "You said you had everything under control." I stopped behind a concrete pillar. Alexander was with her near the entrance. He looked exhausted. Lauren was furious. "I did," he said. "No, Alexander." My rent check bounced. "It's temporary." It bounced. "I will fix it." "How?" "Your accounts are all frozen. Your lawyer looks like a guy who wants to fake his own death." I almost laughed. Alexander rubbed his forehead. "Keep your voice down." "No. You said she would fold. You said she was too emotional to actually put up a fight." My hands went cold. Alexander said nothing. Lauren took a step closer. "And David called me." Alexander stiffened. "Why would David Gallagher call you? He received some kind of legal notice or subpoena. Why the hell is he involved in this?" Lauren didn't answer fast enough. Alexander's face shifted. "Did you call David? Have you been calling David?" I pressed the unlock button on my key fob. The double chirp cut through the quiet parking lot. They turned in unison for one perfect second. It was the three of us, standing amidst the ruins of their shattered conversation. Lauren recovered first. "Are you stalking us?" "No," I said. "I came to get my car." Alexander walked toward me. "Julia." I opened the driver's side door. He saw the boxes in the backseat: clothes, files, fabric swatches, the parking sticker for my new apartment building. Proof that I was building a life he hadn't authorized. "We need to talk," he said. "No. You need to respond to discovery requests." His eyes searched my face. "What did David tell you?" "Ask her," I said, getting into the car. And I shut the door. Alexander stood there as I started the engine. Lauren called his name, her voice high-pitched and scared. He didn't turn back to her immediately. In the rearview mirror, I saw the first crack form between them. I drove away before I enjoyed it too much. The first thing I canceled was the joint family credit card. Not the marriage, not the memories, not the hope. Those had canceled themselves slowly. And then all at once, the card was a practical matter. Alexander treated the limitless corporate family card like oxygen, and I treated it like a monthly administrative chore. It paid for the investor dinners I organized but didn't attend. It paid for flowers I never received. It paid for hotel bills expensed as client entertainment. And once, a very expensive Max Mara coat for Lauren that Alexander had told me was a gift for his mother. The bank representative spoke cautiously. "Miss Lawson, if you remove Mr. Sterling as an authorized user, recurring payments may be declined. Some merchants may contact him." "I know. Are you sure you want to proceed?" I looked at the digital statement on my laptop. Deliveries from Fifth Avenue boutiques. Valet parking at the Serenity Maternity Clinic. A high-end restaurant Alexander had previously deemed too loud for our anniversary dinner. Yes. Proceed. The second thing I canceled was the household management calendar. That was stranger. For 7 years, I had been the invisible gear that kept Alexander's life spinning flawlessly. I booked his dentist appointments. I sent flowers to my mother-in-law. I remembered my father-in-law's medication allergies. I bought baby shower gifts for his employees. I approved menus for investor galas. I sent condolence notes to clients whose names Alexander could barely remember. I maintained a spreadsheet of seating preferences, food allergies, birthdays, petty feuds, preferred wines, and exactly which executive's wife refused to sit next to which executive's ex-wife. Alexander called it meticulousness. Mrs. Sterling called it being a good wife. Now, I called it unpaid labor, used to prop up a man who couldn't even manage his own schedule. Removed Alexander from family shared calendar at 10:13 a.m. At 10:27 a.m. he called. I let it ring. At 10:29 a.m. a text. Why did the dinner with Miss Song disappear? At 10:31 a.m. Julia, don't be childish. At 10:34 a.m. Where's the guest list? At 10:41 a.m. You're embarrassing the wrong people. I wondered who he meant. The investors who would be served the wrong wine? Mrs. Sterling, whose dermatologist appointment I wouldn't confirm. Lauren, whose rent wouldn't be paid. Or Alexander himself, finally realizing that competence had slept next to him for 7 years and had now changed the locks. I forwarded everything to Sophia and went back to my design work. The client was a boutique hotel in Montauk. My client, my work, my invoice, my name. Thursday night, the gala with Miss Song had become a predicted disaster. I went anyway. Not as Alexander's wife, but as her personal guest. She was 70 years old, incredibly wealthy, possessed a razor-sharp eye, and suffered no fools. I had designed her Hamptons estate 3 years prior. She liked me because I had told her the truth about her terrible overhead lighting. Alexander liked her because she knew everyone worth knowing. She spotted me at the entrance to the hotel ballroom and greeted me warmly. You look lighter, she said. I dropped some dead weight. A husband, I replied. For the first time that week, I genuinely laughed. The ballroom sparkled with brilliant chandeliers and quiet chaos. I noticed the errors immediately. An executive's wife was seated at the same table as her ex-husband. They were serving crab cakes to Mr. Cohen, who was deathly allergic to shellfish. A vegetarian investor was being served prime rib. The printed programs featured the foundation's old logo. Lauren stood near the stage in a jade green satin gown, one hand resting on her bump, beautiful and perfectly useless. Mrs. Sterling moved through the room with a smile so tight it could cut glass. Alexander saw me from across the room. A flash of relief crossed his face. It hurt in a brand new way. Not because I missed him, but because he saw me and actually thought reinforcements had finally arrived. He crossed the room quickly. Julia, thank God you're here. I need the correct seating chart. I'm a guest. His smile froze. Julia, please. Past his shoulder, I saw Lauren trying to explain to the executive's wife why her ex-husband was at the same table. Ask Lauren. She seemed so eager to take my place. His eyes flared. Now is not the time. That's exactly what you said in court. A waiter paused near us, then wisely backed away. Alexander lowered his voice. Do you want to make me look incompetent? It is no longer my job to manage how you look. That hit him. He stared at me, and for a second, I saw genuine confusion. Not anger. Confusion. Alexander had believed my support was a natural resource, like sunlight or gravity. The idea that I could simply turn it off had never crossed his mind. Lauren appeared at his side. Alexander, the director's wife, is furious. Why did you seat her with her ex-husband? I didn't seat anyone, he snapped. I smiled. Exactly. Lauren's gaze snapped to me. Instead of enjoying this, you could help. Yes, I could, I said. But I won't. Alexander grabbed my elbow. Not hard enough to leave a bruise, but hard enough to underscore the sheer arrogance of thinking my body still responded to his demands. The ballroom didn't stop, but the people near us noticed. Miss Song noticed. Mr. Cohen noticed. Mrs. Sterling noticed. I looked down at his hand on my arm. Let go of me. He dropped his hand. I took a step back. Don't ever touch me again. His face flushed deep red. Are you making a scene? No. You're the one making the scene. Miss Song appeared at my side, looking like a perfectly dressed blade. Mr. Sterling, she called out. Mr. Cohen is asking if the quarterly dividend figures are still accurate. Alexander's face changed. Dividends had become a dangerous word. He excused himself immediately. Lauren stayed behind. It was the first time we were alone in a public space without Alexander or his mother filling the gap between us. She looked me up and down. Do you enjoy humiliating him? No, I said. He humiliates himself. I just stopped cleaning it up. He loves me. That is not a legal defense. Her hand went to her belly. You can't even imagine what it means to protect a child. I kept my voice low. Do not use that baby as a receipt for my money. The softness vanished from her face. You had 7 years. She spat. If you had given him a family, maybe he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. That struck the only place I hadn't armored. Alexander and I had quietly tried to have a child for almost 2 years. Then I had a miscarriage at 10 weeks, miscarrying in a hotel bathroom during a charity weekend in Boston. Alexander had been downstairs at a donor dinner. He only answered his phone after I called him 4 times. Later that night, he held me tightly, cried, and never spoke of it again. I hadn't told Mrs. Sterling. I hadn't told Lauren. So Alexander must have told her. I set my champagne glass down before my hands started shaking. Does repeating that make you feel like the chosen one? I asked. Lauren blinked. I took a step closer. Because you sound like a woman who picked up someone else's cruelty and mistook it for a jewel. Her face went pale. I walked away before she could reply. In the restroom, I locked the stall door and held onto it until the wave passed. I didn't cry because Lauren deserved my tears. I cried for the woman. I used to be the one who had once lain bleeding on a bathroom floor, worried that if someone found her, Alexander would feel embarrassed. That woman deserved my tears. When I returned to the ballroom, Alexander was looking for me. I walked right past him and took an Uber back to my apartment. I signed the final audit approval document. No more wifely duties. No more emotional bookkeeping. No more helping Alexander look like a reliable man. Alexander came to my apartment on a rainy night. That was my first thought as I looked through the peephole, seeing him standing under the dim hallway light, hair wet, dark trench coat dripping, jaw clenched in a desperation he would later call concern. He shouldn't know where I live. My second thought was, of course he knows. Men like Alexander call crossing boundaries concern, and they call it harassment when women document it. At first, I didn't open the door. Julia, he said, I know you're in there. I stood on the other side of the door, barefoot, phone in hand. Go away. We need to talk. Not without lawyers. He sighed heavily. I could hear the strain in his voice as he tried to control himself. Please, that word stopped me. Not because it softened me, but because Alexander rarely used please unless he wanted something so desperately he was willing to wear humility like a borrowed coat. Just 10 minutes. That's all. I thought about calling Sophia. Then I imagined Alexander telling a judge he had come to try and settle things privately, but I had stubbornly refused to speak to him. Reasonable men love creating unreasonable women. So I opened the door, leaving the security chain attached. Alexander looked past me into the apartment. A small one-bedroom, white walls, a narrow galley kitchen, moving boxes stacked near an armchair, fabric swatches on a table, a second-hand floor lamp with a crooked shade. It wasn't the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. His face took on a strange expression. You live here? Yes. You could have stayed at the house. You brought another woman into my marriage. I needed a room without her shadow. You're exaggerating. I am precise. He looked tired. Truly tired. There were shadows under his eyes I had never seen before, and his suit was less perfect than usual. A part of me recognized him as the man who had once fallen asleep with his head in my lap while I proofread contracts. The man who had slow danced with me in our unfinished kitchen before the floors were even stained. The man who had cried when I miscarried. That recognition was dangerous. I didn't unlatch the chain. My lawyer thinks we should settle, Alexander said. After seeing how you handle discovery, I imagine your lawyer has thought about it a lot. I'm prepared to make an offer, he said. Finally. The point. Not an apology. An offer. $2 million, he said. A cash settlement. You keep your design firm. We sell the Brooklyn Heights house and split it 50/50 after clearing the debts. You drop any claim to the equity in Sterling Luxury Developments, and you stop subpoenaing Lauren's records. He said it as if it were an act of profound generosity. I stared at him. Alexander, just the down payment on the house is worth more than what you owe me. That contract is of dubious enforceability. It was acknowledged in your internal valuations. His face froze. Claire's cardboard box had hit the mark. Where did you get that evidence? From your sister. I said nothing. His eyes narrowed. You dragged my sister into this? No. Your lies dragged her into this. He looked down the hall, then back at me. My family was good to you. No. Your family was incredibly expensive. Julia, he said, using my name like a leash. A flash of pain crossed his face. It looked real then. I hated that I could still decipher his flaws. A mistake, he said. Missing a highway exit is a mistake. Forgetting a birthday is a mistake. Hiding wire transfers for a year. Bringing another woman into my home. Furnishing her apartment with my belongings. Skipping a court hearing for her ultrasound. And using her mouth to weaponize my miscarriage is not a mistake. It's a pattern of what you did, I said. He blinked. What do you want? A private conversation about what you did, out loud, I answered. I betrayed you, he swallowed hard. And I used joint funds in a way I shouldn't have. No, I said. Be specific. His jaw twitched. Julia, do I really have to? Say it. I used joint funds for Lauren, and I hid corporate dividends. He looked away. I waited. The rain beat against the window at the end of the hall. A dog barked somewhere downstairs. The phone in my hand was recording. The screen dark. Finally, Alexander said, I let you think you were crazy when you were right. That hurt because it was the first sentence that actually sounded like the truth. My throat tightened, but I didn't move. Why? I asked. He let out a hollow, humorless laugh. Because if I admitted you were right, I would have become the bad guy. No, I said. Because if I knew I was right, I would have left. He looked at me. The bedrock truth of it all. Control. Not love, not confusion, not a man torn between two women. Control. He took a step toward the chained door. I loved you. I know. Relief sparked in his eyes. I let him live in it for a brief second. Then I said, that's why I stayed too long. His relief died. I'm not your enemy, he said. You threatened me last night. I was angry. That is not a useful legal defense. He closed his eyes briefly. If you keep pushing this, you're going to damage the company. The board will step in. My father will step in. People could lose their jobs. You should have thought about those people before you backdated invoices. You don't understand the scope of this. I understand it perfectly. I spent 7 years making your life look stable. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a low voice, Lauren lied about the David thing. I didn't feel anything for that guy. Does that tell you something? No. That is an issue between you and Lauren. She might have lied about other things. That is also an issue between you and Lauren. He looked almost offended. You don't care? I care about court orders. I care about my house, my money, and my peace. I do not care if the woman you chose lied to you. You lied to me, too. His face twisted for a second, then pride pieced it back together. So this is it? It's over. Yes. 7 years. And you can just close the door like this? I looked at the security chain between us. No, Alexander. You were the one who closed it every time, expecting me to be waiting on the other side. And I shut the door. He knocked once. Julia. For one dangerous second, I leaned against the heavy wood. Memories surfaced. Alexander laughing in the kitchen. Alexander carrying me across the threshold of the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. Alexander whispering that everything would be okay after the miscarriage. Then, the image of Lauren in my silk robe. I stepped back. If you don't leave, I'm calling building security. Silence. Then footsteps. The elevator doors opening and closing. I saved the recording. The next morning, Sophia filed an expanded motion. Lauren Vance and Vance Consulting were officially named as third-party recipients of disputed marital assets. The motion asked the court to compel her to produce her relevant financial records. The claim on the Sterling Luxury Developments equity was clarified using the internal valuations provided by Claire. Alexander's attempt to force a private settlement under pressure, And his threatening messages, "Don't make me, your enemy," were also submitted to the court. "Threats are evidence too," Sophia had said. The final hearing was set for Monday. Sunday night, I slept better than I had in months. Not peacefully, but without waiting to hear footsteps. The second hearing began like the first. Alexander's chair was empty. This time, no one pretended. Attorney Foster looked like he had aged 5 years and 9 days. He stood at the defense table with 2 thick binders, a legal pad, and the expression of a lawyer who realizes his client is doing exactly what he advised him not to do. John Sterling sat in the gallery. Mrs. Sterling was absent. Claire sat 3 rows behind me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, pale but resolute. Lauren was also absent. Her attorney had filed an appearance on her behalf to oppose the subpoena for Vance Consulting's records. But she herself had not shown up. At 8:57 a.m., Sophia's phone buzzed. She looked at it, then at me. "Alexander Sterling," I said. She nodded, showing me the screen. "Requesting continuance for medical emergency related to Lauren's pregnancy. Be there as soon as possible." I read the text twice and laughed. Not loudly, not happily, just enough to expel the absurdity from my body. "He still thinks it works," I said. Sophia placed the phone face down. "Then we will have to educate him again." Judge Bennett entered at 9 a.m. All rise. Everyone sat. Everyone held their breath. Attorney Foster stood up immediately. "Your Honor, my client is dealing with an urgent medical emergency related to Miss Vance's pregnancy. We respectfully request a brief continuance." Judge Bennett stared at him for a few seconds. "Is Mr. Sterling admitted to the hospital?" "No, Your Honor. Miss Vance is a party to this divorce not directly, but issues involving her have been raised. Mr. Sterling was warned at the previous hearing that his personal choices would not delay court proceedings." Attorney Foster swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." Denied. No drama, no tirade, just the sound of a door slamming shut. Sophia began with a comprehensive timeline. It was important. They say juries love emotion, but judges, even when there are no juries, love logical order. A clean timeline could do what anger could not. Date of marriage. Purchase of the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. My down payment. Addition of Alexander to the deed. Investment in Sterling Luxury Developments. Signed equity contract. First, internal valuation acknowledging my 5% conversion. Subsequent valuations with my name. Scrubbed. Increase of the HELOC. Start of the wire transfers. Lauren moving into the Tribeca penthouse. Removal of personal items from the Brooklyn Heights house. Creation of backdated invoices. Submission of an incomplete financial disclosure. Notice of the court date. Alexander's absence at the first hearing. Granting of the TRO. Alexander's private settlement attempt. Threatening texts. Second hearing. Alexander absent again. Every entry had a document. Every document had an exhibit label. Every label had a number. No yelling. No tears. Just a methodical flow. Accountant George Carter testified again, this time with Claire's physical ledgers and additional bank statements. His conclusions were sharper. "Mr. Carter," Sophia asked, "based on the expanded records, have you determined the value of Miss Lawson's 5% equity? Though subject to a final valuation, a preliminary estimate values the stake between $800,000 and $1.5 million. Attorney Foster objected, citing speculative valuation. Judge Bennett admitted it for preliminary findings. My hands remained clasped, but something inside me unspooled. Alexander had offered $2 million for me to walk away. He knew. Of course he knew. He wasn't guessing. He was haggling over the price of my exhaustion. "Have you identified further transfers to Vance Consulting?" Sophia asked. "Yes. Including 2 payments totaling $95,000 for alleged branding consulting. Did you find any work product corresponding to those consultations?" "No." "Did you also identify payments to Serenity Maternity Clinic?" "Yes." "What was the source of those funds?" "Funds traced back to the HELOC on the Brooklyn Heights property and undeclared dividends from Sterling Luxury Developments." Attorney Foster stood up. "Your Honor, medical expenses for an unborn child should not be presented prejudicially. We are not contesting the medical care itself," Sophia replied. "We are establishing the source of the funds." Objection overruled. Judge Bennett nodded. Next, Claire testified. Her voice trembled as she took the oath. But she didn't look away. Miss Sterling, Sophia asked, did your brother ever discuss Miss Lawson's equity stake with the family? Yes. What did he say? Claire looked at Alexander's empty chair. He said that if Julia ever found out how much her 5% was really worth, she wouldn't be reasonable anymore. A quiet murmur rippled through the gallery. Did he imply he didn't want Miss Lawson to know? Sophia asked. Did you think Miss Lawson was being unreasonable? Claire looked at me. No. I thought she was naive. Naive. The word pierced me cleanly. Not stupid. Not greedy. Not neurotic. Kept in the dark. That was the marriage Alexander wanted. A wife with good taste and infinite patience, but no flashlight. Sophia's closing argument lasted less than 15 minutes. She stood straight, without dramatic gestures, without raising her voice. This hearing is not about punishing infidelity, she said. This court has not been asked to decide if Mr. Sterling was a good husband. The ledgers answer other questions. Did he comply with his financial disclosure obligations? Did he preserve marital assets? Did he honor the contracts he signed? Did he refrain from diverting marital resources to benefit a third party without consent? She paused. The evidence proves he did not. I looked at the empty chair. Miss Lawson, Sophia continued, is not asking the court to heal a broken heart. She is asking the court to enforce documents, restore assets, preserve property, and prevent further concealment. Enforce. The word had become sacred to me. Not revenge, enforcement. Attorney Foster pleaded personal hardship, cited complexity, argued that Alexander had intended to cooperate, argued that corporate records were difficult to compile, and argued that Miss Vance's pregnancy created anomalous emotional pressure. Judge Bennett listened and delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented in this and the prior hearing, the court finds that Mr. Sterling failed to comply with financial disclosure obligations, omitted significant business interests, transferred funds for the benefit of a third party without consent, and attempted to delay proceedings despite proper notice. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. The court further finds that credible evidence exists supporting Miss Lawson's claim for reimbursement of her separate property contributions, the enforcement and valuation of her equity stake in Sterling Luxury Developments, and her right to temporary exclusive possession of the Brooklyn Heights residence. Sophia's shoe tapped mine under the table. I didn't move. The court, the judge continued, maintains the financial restraints on the relevant accounts, orders the immediate preservation and production of all Sterling Luxury Developments records, appoints a neutral valuation expert. It orders the return or compensation of personal property removed from the Brooklyn Heights residence, and orders the payment of legal fees associated with Mr. Sterling's absence and failure to produce discovery. Attorney Foster bowed his head. The court grants Miss Lawson temporary exclusive use and possession of the Brooklyn Heights residence. Mr. Sterling may not enter the property without written consent or a court order. The Brooklyn Heights house. My house. Not because Alexander had given it to me, but because I had proven he had stolen it from me. Judge Bennett wasn't finished. The divorce proceedings will advance uncontested. The financial matters will be resolved in accordance with the findings of this ruling. The divorce decree will be entered following the completion of the valuation. Such a clean phrase for such a violent mercy. The courtroom door opened. Alexander walked in. His hair was messy, his tie loosened, his face pale with a mix of anger, fear, and something bordering on disbelief. Again, the Serenity Maternity Clinic visitor sticker was on his coat. Again, he had come straight from Lauren. This time, no one stepped aside to let him in. Judge Bennett checked her watch. Mr. Sterling, she said, you are late. Alexander's gaze darted from the judge, to Foster, to Sophia, and to me. How did it start? No one answered. The silence was almost beautiful. Then Sophia closed her folder. It's all over, she said. At first, Alexander didn't understand. That was the strangest part. As he stood in the corridor, Foster pulled him aside and started speaking quickly in hushed tones. I watched the reality hit him in pieces. Financial restraints, legal fees, exclusive possession of the house, neutral expert, preservation order, third-party transfers, equity claim. Every sentence altered his posture. First upright, irritated, ready to take control. Then his shoulders stiffened. His jaw went slack. His eyes fixed on me, darted away, then returned. In the end, he didn't look like a man betrayed by his wife. He looked like a man finally reading a contract he should have read a long time ago. I gathered my papers slowly, not to provoke him, but because I no longer needed to rush to make Alexander comfortable. When court was adjourned, he walked toward me. Sophia immediately stepped in front of me. All communications through counsel. Mr. Sterling. He ignored her. Julia. This is madness. I looked past Sophia. No. It's documented. You can't just take the house. I didn't take it. I proved it. His face flushed. This isn't a final judgment. It's an enforcement order. That word hit him too. He looked around. John was speaking quietly with Claire. Attorney Foster was packing his briefcase with the rapid movements of a man who desperately wanted to be somewhere else. The court staff moved around us with bored efficiency. No one was waiting for Alexander to take charge. Stripped of his control over the room, he resorted to an old weapon. I was at the hospital, he said. Lauren had a threatened miscarriage. For a second, everything inside me stopped. I truly hated him. But somewhere in those ruins was an invisible, innocent child. Is the baby okay? I asked. Alexander blinked. He had expected an accusation, not concern. Yes, he said. I think so. Thank goodness. I truly mean that. And I turned away. He followed me out into the corridor. Julia, wait. Sophia called my name softly, a warning not to engage. But I stopped on the courthouse steps. There was one thing I wanted to say to Alexander using my own voice, not through a lawyer or a judge or a legal document. He took 2 steps down. The morning light hit his face, exposing every line of exhaustion. Are you destroying my life? He asked. No. I'm just stopping you from using my life as raw material. His lips tightened. Do you think you bear no responsibility in any of this? No. That surprised him. I looked the other way. I continued. I tried to convince myself. I let you shrink me because I thought it was the price of a marriage. I am responsible for staying too long, but I am not responsible for what you did while I stayed. For a moment, he had no answer. A black Uber pulled up to the curb. Lauren was in the back seat, wearing oversized sunglasses. She rolled the window halfway down. Alexander, she called out. We need to go. Her voice was sharp. Not scared, impatient. Alexander didn't turn around. Lauren looked at me. Are you happy now? I looked at her through the open window. No, I said. But I'm free to be, and that's enough. Her lips parted. Julia, Alexander whispered. I walked past the car. Behind me, Lauren's voice rose. She froze the accounts. Alexander, answer me. Are the accounts okay? Not what happened? Not are you okay, but are the accounts okay? Alexander must have heard it. I knew, because he didn't answer. That afternoon, the news about Sterling Luxury Developments leaked. Court orders involving money travel through closed networks much faster than gossip. Alexander's infidelity was embarrassing. His concealment of assets was dangerous. Investors didn't care who he slept with. They cared about undisclosed debt, discrepancies in internal valuations, and a court restraining order tied to the company's ledgers. John Sterling called me at 4 p.m. I stared at his name on the screen, then answered just before it went to voicemail. Julia, he said. I owe my daughter-in-law an apology. Yes, I said. The blunt answer created a silence. I believed Alexander, John said. Yes, you should have asked for my side of the story. Yes, and I should have known more about the company's ledgers. Yes, he sighed. The board has temporarily suspended Alexander pending an internal investigation. I closed my eyes. I had imagined this moment countless times. Alexander stripped bare, Alexander held accountable, Alexander deprived of the flawless control he wore like a second skin. But it felt less like joy and more like an exhale. That's not my decision, I said. No, it's a consequence of what he did. Then you should tell him that. I was about to hang up when he added, Claire told me everything she gave you. I waited. I am angry, he said, but not at my daughter. That was a greater comfort than I had expected. After the call, I sat at my small kitchen table with a mug of cold tea. For months, I had told myself that if Alexander suffered enough, I would become whole again. But wholeness didn't arrive through his ruin. It arrived in smaller ways. A court order in my purse, the keys to my apartment in my pocket, my name on a project proposal, and the silence of my phone, because I was no longer answering his calls. That evening, Claire showed up with pizza slices and a cheap bottle of wine. "Do you have glasses?" she asked. "2 mugs." "Perfect." We sat on the floor because my furniture delivery was delayed. Claire opened the pizza boxes. "Mom is furious, I imagine. She says you humiliated the family." "No, their accounting ledgers did." Claire offered a faint smile. "Dad is quiet. Which is scarier?" "It always is." She handed me some plastic silverware. Lauren called my mom crying. Apparently, Alexander told her that her apartment wouldn't be affected by the asset freeze. "The rent is late again." I looked at my pizza. "Not my problem." "No," Claire said. "It isn't." We ate in silence for a while. Then Claire said, "David posted something on social media." I didn't look up, so she added, "About Lauren. Not by name, but it's obvious. Is it legally relevant?" "Sophia probably already saved it. Then I don't want to see it." Claire stared at me. "Really?" "Really. It might be satisfying for 10 minutes," I said. "But then it would stay in my head. And I'm trying to clear them out of my head." Claire put down her fork. "Your voice sounds different." I thought about it. "No," I replied. "It's just less censored." 2 days later, Alexander left a voicemail. I only listened to it because Sophia said all relevant communications needed to be preserved. His voice was raspy. "Julia, Lauren lied about some things. I don't know how much yet. But I know it doesn't justify what I did. I know I hurt you. I just wanted to talk to someone who knew me before all this." I saved the message and closed the file. Someone who knew me before all this. That was the cruelty of it. He wanted the woman who knew him before the consequences. The woman who believed that beneath the pressure, the pain, and the family expectations, his best self was just trapped. I was getting to know myself after I left him. I didn't call back. The following week, I returned to the Brooklyn Heights brownstone with a locksmith, Elena, and a copy of the court order. Alexander hadn't entered since the ruling. Not that he hadn't tried. The security alarm logged 2 failed access attempts at the side entrance. I forwarded the log to Sophia. "Change all the exterior locks?" the locksmith asked at the front door. "Every single one." Elena stood by my side, gripping her cleaning supplies like a weapon. When the door opened, the house didn't smell like ruin. It smelled stale. The smell of unmoved air. The smell of waiting. I walked slowly into the entryway. The walls were the exact shade of warm white I had selected after comparing 11 different samples. The herringbone floors still absorbed the light beautifully. The staircase curved up to the landing where I had hung Christmas garlands last December, while Alexander barked into his phone about a deal. Just get it done. The dining room wall, where my charcoal sketch of NYC used to hang, was empty. I touched the blank space, and Elena said softly, "We'll get it back. Or maybe we'll hang something better." I smiled. Yes. We spent the day cataloging the missing items, photographing damages, opening the windows, and emptying the 2 boxes of belongings Lauren had left in the guest room closet. They included a scarf, a receipt from the Serenity Maternity Clinic, and a tube of lipstick that had rolled under the bed. Elena picked it up with 2 fingers. "What do we do with this, ma'am?" "Throw it out." She dropped it into a heavy-duty trash bag. And that was how Lauren left my house without a confrontation. In a garbage bag, with a receipt and a tube of lipstick. That night, I slept in the Brooklyn Heights house for the first time in months. Not in the master bedroom. Not yet. I slept on a makeshift futon in the small downstairs parlor, under an old quilt Elena had brought from her car. She said houses like to hear someone breathing inside them. At 3 a.m., I woke up. No Alexander coming home late. No phone buzzing with lies. No waiting. For the first time in years, the old brownstone had quieted down around me, and the silence no longer hurt. It took almost a year to finalize the divorce. Not because Alexander fought well, but because he fought emotionally. The 2 things are different. A good legal fight has a structure. His only had pride. He changed lawyers, then tried to argue that the equity agreement was informal, that the HELOC was for commercial purposes, that the payments to Vance Consulting were legitimate, that my personal items had been moved by mistake, that his absence in court was a genuine medical emergency. Every argument arrived wrapped in expensive legal briefs. And every argument shattered against the ledgers. Sophia destroyed the informality argument with the signatures, the emails, and the internal valuations. George Carter destroyed the commercial purpose argument with digital trails and the lack of deliverables. Elena destroyed the mistake argument with her testimony about dates and instructions. And the court destroyed the absence excuse with the proof of service logs and Alexander's text messages. Lauren didn't attend the final hearing. Her lawyer produced only limited records after 2 court orders and a threat of sanctions. The records proved ample spending rent, car lease, medical bills, shopping with no trace of actual work. At the last minute, Alexander, through his new lawyer, requested a prenatal paternity test. I only found out because he tried to reclassify some expenses as potential child support rather than improper transfers. The results were sealed. I didn't ask. People expected me to want to know. Claire knew. Sophia probably knew. Alexander definitely knew. I didn't need the answer. Whatever the result was, Alexander had chosen Lauren's appointment over our hearing. He chose her rent over my house, his convenience over my clarity, stalling over disclosure. Above all, he had chosen himself. No paternity test could rewrite that fact. The day we signed the final agreement, Alexander arrived early. After everything that had happened, that alone told me he had changed, even if not in a way that mattered to me anymore. He sat across from me in Sophia's conference room. He was thinner than before. His suit was impeccable, but his face was not. There were lines around his mouth I didn't remember. His hair was slightly too long on the sides. His gaze fell to my left hand, noted the absence of the ring, and shifted elsewhere. Sophia sat next to me. Alexander's new lawyer sat next to him. The settlement agreement was thick. The Brooklyn Heights brownstone was mine, free and clear. After the mortgage was paid off with the cash Alexander owed me as part of the settlement. My 5% stake in Sterling Luxury Developments was bought out in cash, based on the neutral valuation, plus sanctions for concealment. He reimbursed me for all joint funds used for Lauren's expenses. He paid my legal fees for his defaults and discovery. My personal items were returned where possible or compensated for. The charcoal sketch of NYC came back damaged. The Nantucket photograph did not come back. The blue blanket was gone. The dining chairs came back scratched. It was fine. Things could be repaired, repurchased, or abandoned. The clause I cared about most was the one Alexander hated most. No confidentiality agreement preventing truthful legal, financial, or judicial disclosures. He had tried to bury an NDA in the paperwork. Sophia had smiled and said no. Before signing, Alexander asked for 5 minutes. Sophia looked at me. I nodded. His lawyer stepped out but remained visible through the glass walls. Alexander looked at his hands first. That was new, too. I don't know how to say something that doesn't sound hollow, he said. Then don't say anything. A pained smile crossed his face. You weren't this sharp before. I sanded down my edges for you. He accepted that. I thought you would wait, he said. There it was, the entire marriage, in a nutshell. He thought I would wait. That I would endure the dinners and wait. That I would endure the lies and wait. That I would endure Lauren and wait. That I would endure the humiliation and wait. That I would wait during the hearings. That I would wait through another woman's pregnancy. That I would be standing there in the corridor, waiting, when he showed up late with his visitor sticker on his coat. His eyes reddened. It's the part of myself I can't forgive. Forgiveness is no longer my department, Alexander. He flinched. I didn't enjoy it. That surprised me. Once, I had wanted him to suffer the way I had suffered. I wanted him to wake up at 3 a.m. and stare at the ceiling, ruminating over words that cut too deep. I wanted him to be embarrassed, exposed, and abandoned in public. But looking at him across the table, with his bloodshot eyes and a fountain pen in his hand, I just wanted it to be over. That too was freedom. No longer needing his pain for my healing. I really did love you, he said. I know. He looked at me with an instinctive hope. You loved the life I made possible for you, I continued. His face collapsed. Maybe in the beginning. I didn't know the difference, he said. Maybe there is a chance for us, in another way. No. The answer was gentle. Endings don't always have to be loud. He closed his eyes. I signed first. Julia Lawson. My hand didn't shake. Alexander signed after me. When the final page was signed, Sophia gathered the documents. Alexander remained seated. I stood up. Julia, he called out. I stopped in the doorway. What are you going to do with the house? I thought about the Brooklyn Heights brownstone in the morning light. The arched doorways, the blue tiles in the bathroom, the dining room wall waiting for new art, the front parlor where clients could sit with teacups and fabric swatches while the sun slanted across the floor. The front rooms will be my design studio, I said. The rest will be entirely mine. His face shifted at the last word. Mine. Not ours. Not his. Mine. I left him sitting in the conference room and walked out. 6 weeks later, the sign was installed. Julia Lawson Design. Black lettering on a solid brass plaque next to a heavy blue front door. Small, elegant, mine. I had asked the jeweler to melt down my wedding ring, not into a necklace or earrings, nothing that would ever touch my skin again. The jeweler alloyed it with other metals to forge the brass screws that fastened the sign to the brick wall. An old promise, now a solid piece of hardware. Not romantic, practical. On opening day, Elena came wearing a red dress, carrying flowers from her own garden. Claire brought champagne to celebrate. Miss Song brought 3 potential clients and a bottle of wine older than my marriage. Sophia sent a bouquet of white roses and a handwritten note with a single word, proceed. I read it and laughed. For a while, people asked if Alexander ever tried to come back. He did. Not dramatically, like that rainy night at my apartment, but in quieter ways. A stray email, a handwritten letter that arrived on what would have been our anniversary. A voicemail after the baby was born, his voice strained, saying life had gotten complicated, and he only now understood what loneliness meant. I kept only what Sophia told me to keep. I never replied to any of it. Lauren moved out of the Tribeca penthouse after the rent payments stopped. Her shell company, Vance Consulting, dissolved quietly. Mrs. Sterling resigned from 2 charity boards when the divorce became humiliating gossip in the social circles she cared about most. John Sterling stepped back from his public appearances. Claire left the family foundation and went back to Columbia for her master's degree. Alexander eventually kept working, but he was no longer the man who could walk into a room and expect the world to bend to him. The consequences hadn't ruined him. They had simply introduced him to gravity for the first time. As for me, my life didn't become perfect. It just became mine. Some mornings, before clients arrived, I would walk through the Brooklyn Heights house with a mug of coffee in my hand, touching the banister, running a hand over the restored fireplace, brushing the corner of the dining room wall that now held a new piece of art. Not because the house proved I had won, but because I knew exactly what it had cost me to stop losing. One afternoon, almost a year after the first hearing, a young couple stood in my entryway, happily bickering over tile samples. The woman apologized, embarrassed. "We are being so ridiculous," she said. "They're just bathroom tiles." I smiled. "They're never just bathroom tiles." She laughed, not understanding the true weight of my words. And that was perfectly fine. I hoped she never had to. After they left, I locked the studio door and stood on the front steps. The late afternoon light caught the brass plaque. My name shone back at me. Not a Sterling. Not someone's wife. Not a woman waiting. Just me. And for the first time in years, it was more than enough.